Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome back to the Stop Overthinking podcast. We have a career coach with us today talking about getting unstuck and feeling more fulfilled in your work life. Mary Jeffries is a career coach and the founder of The Step Forward, a career coaching and advisory firm that offers coaching services to help clients reach their career goals and ultimately think bigger in their careers. Prior to launching The Step Forward, Mary spent the past decade working as a recruiter in various industries and worked at some of the largest and most high-growth companies, including Meta, Pinterest, and HP. Welcome to the Stop Overthinking podcast, Mary.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So we talked a little bit offline, of course, to plan this episode. And you mentioned that one of the things that you work with clients the most is around gaining some clarity and getting unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more about what you do and how you can help people get unstuck.
Yeah, so I do career coaching. I got into career coaching kind of as my work as a recruiter. It just kind of happened organically about 4.5 years ago during COVID. Just started to have those conversations and kind of led to me making the move to become a full-time coach. And what I do is I work with clients. I'd say about 85% of my client base are women. And I work with clients at all career levels. And it includes anything from job searching to wanting to get promoted or wanting to make a transition. Basically any issue or thing that you come up in your career, I work with clients to kind of help them resolve that or work through. And I think clarity is a big piece of that because a lot of my clients come to me like, I feel unstuck. I don't feel fulfilled in my career, or I'm looking for clarity of like, I'm not sure if the job I'm in is the role I'm supposed to be in, kind of what should I do? I think that at the end of the day, a lot of the issues, even if it's like a job search, sometimes like getting clarity of like, well, what job do I want? Like what's not working? What am I doing that's not working for me? And so kind of working with clients to like see that. I say as a coach, a lot of times the clients, you have all of the answers you need. It's kind of my guide as a coach to help you get unstuck, to kind of give you that clarity and kind of work with you to kind of be that reflection to yourself. Of sometimes you kind of need like that, advocate or coach to kind of like reflect back to us, like which we already kind of know. I know through my journey in my career, I've definitely had moments where I've felt stuck or I've lacked clarity. And when you have those aha moments, I know they make the difference. So I think that's one of the most fulfilling things I like about my work is that I get to help clients like kind of like live their dreams or kind of think bigger and kind of get clarity of like, okay, this is where I'm at, but here's like where I want to go and all of those things. And it just kind of is fulfilling, rewarding.
Yes. And I agree. One of the great things about coaching is just we have a lot of questions often, and the clients have the answers, and you just need somebody to kind of help you guide through that process.
Right.
Chances are, you know what you really want. It might seem like it's out of reach, or that I don't know how to get it. And so that's where coaching can be so helpful. So when a client comes to you, is the clarity in getting unstuck kind of the number one thing, or what is the most common topic or concern that people bring to you for coaching?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel like sometimes it's not always people that will directly come and say, sometimes it is people that like, I'm not happy in my job, I feel unsatisfied. But the issue is like they're not sure how to like get unstuck. Like, well, what do I do to get there? Or even with a job search, because again, I would say I think job searching right now is probably the biggest thing that people are coming to for. I need help finding a job, or I need help with my resume, or I need help with, my job search and all of the things that are involved in that. But I think sometimes when you take that step back, it is like the bigger issue of like, I'm unstuck. I'm not even sure, like, I'm not sure what I need to do to get there. So whether it's like, I need help with my resume, I'm not quite sure. I'm applying to all these jobs. I'm not hearing anything. Like, what do I need to do? Or what am I not doing right? And I know I want something else in my career, but I'm just like not sure what it is. But I do think a lot of that goes to like that stuckness. You know that you probably need to like update. You haven't updated your resume in like 5 years, and you probably do need to shift it. But it's kind of like you feel stuck of like either you don't know what to work on, or you're kind of scared, like, well, I'm afraid to apply for this job or whatever it could be. So I think a lot of the issues that I see do kind of go back to that feeling stuck or feeling needing clarity.
When people ultimately end up, needing some of that clarity, we talked about coaches have questions. What kind of things are you asking them, or what kind of process are you having them do to unearth some of those answers?
Yeah, I can kind of go back to like those like simple question of like when someone is like, I feel stuck in my career, like I want something more of like, well, what could that be for you? Like, what is your big dream? Or what do you enjoy doing? Or what would you do if you could do anything? Kind of like getting to those like questions or like what's missing. Or if someone's like, I'm working with a client, they're like, hey, I feel unstuck. I'm really, struggling in my position. Like I'm not motivated or I'm lacking concentration right now. I like ask the question of like, well, what do you think is causing it? And sometimes people don't obviously know. Some people do have an obvious answer of like, I'm not, being challenged or I'm just unhappy. I've been here for 5 years. But sometimes you ask those like other questions. Okay, why is it that you've been in this role for 5 years and you're not being challenged? Is it because you're scared? Is it because you're afraid to make a move? Is it because you're waiting for something? So sometimes it is the baseline questions. And sometimes I've found with clients, especially ones that like, they are struggling with being stuck or like lacking clarity, they struggle a lot with asking those questions because they expect a coach to give them the answers of like, just do this. And it's kind of like, well, we have to do that base work of like understanding, well, what is like the root problem? What is the actual issue? And sometimes when you don't do that work, you kind of like, you can skip to the solution, but you're kind of really not fixing that main problem. So I think that is something I've also noticed with clients of kind of like wanting to skip that main part and being like, well, okay, we need to take a step back and kind of really focus on that. We can't solve all the answers without kind of knowing. So focusing on some of those like questions that kind of maybe feel simple or sometimes people don't want to answer, but it's kind of like you have to do the hard work to like get there, like figuring out like, okay, this is why I'm not applying for a job, or this is why I'm struggling with like my interviews or whatever it could be.
You've brought up so many points. My brain is like all over the place.
So,
where do we want to go next? So one thing that I hear about all the time is that, people maybe they like their job or they at least, that part's okay, but they're having interpersonal conflicts either with a coworker or a manager that is really reducing satisfaction that they're considering leaving. So if somebody can identify that is an issue, where do you come in as a career coach in that sort of a situation?
Yeah, so that is one, and actually it's funny you say that because I don't know the exact statistic, but there's some statistic that says that one of the number of reasons that people leave jobs is because their manager or sometimes the team, the people they work with, that's kind of one of the number one drivers. Again, like things are a bit like different right now for a lot of industries, but overall, that typically is like one of the number of reasons that people aren't happy in their job is because their manager or the team that they work with, or they just are having some type of conflict in the office. So yeah, if a client comes to me and they say like, hey, I love my job, or like I'm happy with my job, but it's my manager's my main issue. That is something that I will coach them through to kind of understand, okay, what are your options? What is the issue with your manager? Is it because they're a micromanager? Is it because of they have some type of like bias against you? Kind of what is like the issue? And figuring out, okay, we've uncovered the issue. What are your options there? If it is an issue of like, your manager is a micromanager, trying to kind of guide them, like, how could you have that conversation with them? Are there things you could do to elevate that? Is there a skip level you can go to, or is there some way that you could have that conversation with your manager? I think the honest truth is sometimes you can't have those conversations with certain managers. Some managers are just unfortunately who they are and they're not going to change. But I work with clients to be like, okay, what changes can you make internally, but also you need to start looking externally too. And sometimes even just uncovering what that is can kind of help clients to understand like, okay, these are things that I can just deal with and accept, this is who my manager is, or this is the issue I'm going to have with my coworker, and here's how I can work through it. But I do think sometimes like you might not be able to work through it. So also have I would say plan B at the time of finding a way to manage it while I can, but then also kind of like looking elsewhere to see if there's another job or role that could be better, or maybe it's an internal position that could be a good fit. I do think it's tricky right now, especially because there's been a lot of layoffs. Job searching is really difficult. So I encourage clients to, in some cases, it is best to stay put where you can. But even if you stay put, you can still keep looking. You can still kind of build that game plan of okay, I'm going to plan to hopefully find a new position in 6 months, a year, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think just thinking about what is the issues that you're having with your team, and kind of can you work through those, or kind of what are the resources you can do to work through that, and what could be that exit plan if you do need to look elsewhere too. It's kind of that fine line of doing what you can, but then also being okay, I might need to just look elsewhere because this is who unfortunately my boss or my team, or just the culture that this company is, and maybe that's not aligned with what's going to be best for you.
Sure. How about that person who recognizes it might be time to move on, but really is afraid of walking away for whatever reason. Maybe it's fear of the unknown, not sure what the pay is going to be, losing vacation time, just any of those transition periods. When there's that element of fear, how are you able to work through and have a conversation with them about what's next?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it is something like if a client comes to me and they know like I'm ready for a change, like I need more, like I'm built for more, and they're just afraid, they're scared to like leave, like take that chance. I always kind of reflect the question of like one question I like to ask clients is like, what are you like running towards? Like, what are you running away from? And kind of getting a sense of like, and if it is something about like I'm staying here because I'm afraid and I'm fearful of like what happens if I leave. I have like, well, how do you think you'll feel if you stay? Because obviously I think fear is such a driver for us in general, whether it's career, like our personal life, or all of those aspects. Like thinking about like how will you feel like if you don't take the chance? And also I always tell people now, especially of like, yes, I know it's a scary time to leave a job that you feel comfortable and is stable, but I think we've learned that like jobs, there's kind of no such thing as like a stable like job at this point, and like your job might feel stable and like yes, you could be really good at your job, but it's also like you could lose your job tomorrow still just by staying there. So I would say be open to the risk and kind of think like what's like driving you. I always say fear is like not an acceptable reason. Like it's fine to stay comfortable. So if you are just like, I just want to chill and I want to focus on spending time with my family or travel, or I'm just comfortable and it's kind of a cushy job, that's fine. Or if you're like, I'm, the money is a big driver, whatever it is, I think it's fine to like stay in a role. Like that stability is like a big thing right now. But I say like, it's not okay to stay somewhere because like you're scared or you're fearful. Really take a step back and think about like, well, how will I feel if I stay where I'm at and I didn't like try? If they don't take that chance, you would probably regret it. And just kind of understanding if we'll never be ready, like when we do something, or all the pieces don't always align. And sometimes it's just like you have to just leap, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it could not work out. Like you could make the jump and you could realize this was not the best thing. The pieces will align. So even if you take the jump and like let's say you fall on your face, you still tried, and that counts for something. I know it might not feel that way. So I encourage clients, if the fear is the main motivator, let's work past that and kind of uncover what can we do. And also say apply for jobs. I think a lot of clients come to me and they're just even afraid to even apply or to like go on an interview. And I always say that just because you apply for a job, it doesn't mean you have to accept it. So you can always just start by like trying or start by having a conversation. You can always say, you know what? I'm happy, I'm good, I'm going to stay where I'm at. But you could also, you never know. So at least have the conversation, think about it, consider the jump. Maybe you decide not to jump, but consider it or think about it.
And my perfectionistic listeners out there are like having heart palpitations because they want certainty, right? Everything to line up. I need to know exactly the way it's going to be. And of course, in our mind, we think that that's even a possibility when that's not realistic at all. So along those lines, when, this audience is overthinking, people pleasers, perfectionists. And so if you see people with some of those tendencies, what kind of things are limiting them specifically into moving on to the next dream job or really enjoying their work?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of being afraid to try, or kind of like you said about like kind of wanting to get like having all the cards lined up, wanting everything to be perfect before you make a move. And rarely in life will all the stars align and everything be perfect, or will you be ready? And sometimes you just have to like take the jump and like do it. And I would say, she might have talked about this as well. It's like, I definitely like suffer from that myself of like, I'm a people pleaser. I want things to be perfect. I have to like, think things through fully. And I'm not really a risk averse person. But sometimes you have to just be willing to take that chance and see what happens. If you've like a lot of clients, their biggest thing is they overthink, but then they're not doing an action. Okay, yes, you can overthink everything, but like what is at least one step you can do, like push something forward? So maybe if it's someone that's like, I want to get promoted, okay, well, I can set up a conversation, a chat with like a manager at my company, or how can I find a sponsor, or whatever it could be. So we probably won't stop ourselves from overthinking, but then it's kind of that like, okay, well, while we're overthinking and obsessed with getting everything right, like what can we do in the meantime to like push this dream or push like whatever we're working towards like forward?
Yes. The chronic problem for us overthinkers is that we are in our brain way more than just doing actions for sure.
Right.
Along those lines, you mentioned about, actually applying for jobs or taking an interview. Do you see difference between males and females in terms of the job searching and what people are applying for, and maybe even some of that risk taking. So just
Yeah,
dive into that.
definitely do. I would say even kind of taking a step like back, what I think I mentioned when we first kicked things off today is that like probably 85% of my clients are women. And it's interesting because when I started, like I wanted my base to be like women just because like that is kind of clients that I resonate the most fully with, but I didn't necessarily like advertise as like, hey, coaching for women. But I've just found that women in career coaching, you might have found this for yourself in like life coaching, is that a lot of times women are more open and like seeking coaching. And I found that within my friends and like my network. And I don't think it's necessarily that men can't benefit from coaching, but it just seems like a lot of times like women are harder on themselves and also like overthinking and kind of wanting to like process things. And again, it's not that I think men have those same struggles, but maybe just kind of like go about it a different way or kind of handle it internally. But definitely when it comes to job searching, and I've even seen this back in my time as a recruiter, is that I would see a lot of women not apply for jobs, kind of like reading like the job description and feeling like I have to like looking at the qualifications. And if there's like one or two qualifications, I'm like, I don't quite have this. Like maybe a job is you need 7 years of experience and I like the client has like 5. Women are more likely to like not apply for those positions where there's a statistic, even if they only match, I think if they said like 2 or 3, a man is more likely to just apply for a job, even if like they don't meet all the requirements. For women, a lot of times will like hold themselves back and not apply if they don't meet every requirement for a job. And I know I felt that too when I've looked for jobs of just being like, well, I don't quite have like this experience. And what I tell my clients now, just apply, especially if it's like applying for a job itself. So like typically it's not like a very time consuming process, but if it is just a job, especially if it's a job that you are excited about, you would be excited to do, apply for the position. Especially if you have your resume ready and you're already applying, it doesn't hurt to put your resume out there and just to see what happens. I think with a lot of my clients kind of work through that fear of like, oh, I can't apply. You know, what if I apply and I don't get it? Well, then you just don't get it. But it's also if you never applied, then you're not going to get it either. I find with a lot of women, and even I've had these conversations with myself and even with amongst my friends, is if there's a job that you're interested in, women will not apply because they're overthinking about the future of like, oh, well, I can't apply for this manager job because I'm planning to hopefully have a baby in a year or whatever. You know, I'm going to get married and like, I don't think I'll wanting to like travel as much. And I remind myself again of this too. We need to plan for where we're at today, worry about like that a year from now. You know, example, if you're trying to have a family, like, yes, then you can scale back, but like, you should make plans where you are today, where you want to go, but not in a way that should hold back your career.
And that's so fascinating in and of itself, because a man who's getting married, I'm not sure that that's going to hold him back, or that they're planning on starting their family soon.
Right. Yes.
Right, you know, because they're not going to be out necessarily from, you know, a postpartum maternity leave sort of situation. And so certainly I can understand that. And that we do as women have some considerations and barriers, some of which we impose on ourselves, right? So when somebody is kind of lacking confidence in, especially like interview, how can you help somebody to feel more confident? Maybe they don't have all of the qualifications, and say they get that interview anyway. How can you prep them, and what kind of things are you working on to get them to not feel like an imposter when they walk in for that conversation?
Yeah, and that's always a good point about to remind clients, if you get an interview, there's something that this hiring manager, recruiter saw on your resume, saw on your background that they, you know, that they were excited about. There's something. No one's going to schedule you for an interview and just be like, oh, this candidate's trash. Like, obviously there's something that excites them. So obviously take a step back. If you got an interview, and even in today's job market, of like, it's really hard to even get an interview. So if you get an interview, that's celebration in itself, but then also like there is something that they saw in you that they are excited about. So I always remind candidates of like, if you get an interview, there's something there. It doesn't obviously mean that you're going to get the job, but like there's a reason that they've like reached out to you and like had this conversation. And so have confidence in that of like, there is something that you can bring to this role. It's kind of your job to kind of sell them on that. And I also would like to remind people is like when you go on an interview, like, yes, it is something about you're nervous and you want to present your best self. I like to remind people if you're interviewing company as well. So it's kind of a two-way street. You want to present your best self. You want to sell them on why you can do the job. But also, like, I think it's sometimes help to calm people's nerves too. If like it's a two-way street, they need to listen to me and kind of show me like what's here for me as well. Also remember, like, what do you want to see in this position? Like, what would make you excited for the role? And then also, I think another thing in general is rejection does build confidence. I know it's something that like rejection is really tough and no one enjoys it. I don't like rejection.
Yeah, I
Something
hear
that
you.
really build your confidence. And like, if you hear no, or if you go on an interview, even if you bomb or if you don't get the job, like that's going to give you more confidence to go into like the next one too, or the one after that. Kind of like dating. It's kind of one of those things about it. It's not fun to do, but then once you're like doing it and like it gives you that confidence. So I think sometimes just like even starting by going on the interview.
Well, and from the mindset coaching that I do, I think the perspective there that can help is that what am I going to learn from this experience?
Yeah.
So whether it's, hey, I didn't get the job, but I got to practice interviewing. And so now I have some of those questions. I'll be ready the next time. Or that I've done it once and so I can do it again. But looking at it as what did I get from the experience? Because there's usually sometimes a whole lot of things, but it's what I gained, what I can use next instead of just focusing on I didn't get the job or that I'm being rejected again. And it's hard. It's a lot of life coaching, but because we spend so much time I often am coaching around career kinds of things too. And that we do spend so much time. We want to like our jobs, to feel fulfilled, or at least get something out of it. So I think it's natural and people can get help in many different ways. But I love that they have options like you to help them kind of navigate this process as well. Are some of the other kinds of services that you offer? So you do the coaching piece, you mentioned resumes and things like that. Can you give us just kind of an overview of the services that you do provide?
Yeah. So I would say like my core service is kind of like my one-on-one kinds of coaching session. And that's a session where I work with a client, usually it's an hour-long session. And if you're working with them on any type of career topic that they're struggling with, so it could be about interview, I'm searching for a job, I'm working on my resume, I'm struggling with my manager, I'm struggling with like an internal conflict in the office, or I'm considering like leaving, or I'm having an offer negotiate, like whatever it could be, like that session can kind of really be used to talk through like any session or any type of career topic. But in addition to that, I do more specialized sessions, whether it's people that are needing their resume customized or working through rebuilding resumes or doing mock interview prep, and also sessions based on how to like build out your job search strategy and more strategy based sessions. And I think one of the interesting things like you just mentioned is that, you know, clients sometimes will come in for one thing and then it's going to lead to like a whole conversation about something else. Like, okay, well, you came because like you were wanting to start a job search, but it's really that you're dissatisfied with your current job. What are the things you could do to adjust that? So it's interesting about coaching in general. Sometimes people think that they know the main issue, but sometimes they don't know it until they have the conversation. Like, well, actually, let's work on this too.
Yeah. The question that I have for you, because this comes up in sometimes generational types of conversations. So I'm in my late 40s and we often will hear about younger to me people in their 20s or 30s. It seems like they change jobs a lot more often than I have, where I've had two jobs that were over a decade a piece, kind of a thing. But I'm wondering, do you tend to see that, and why do you think that is? And is there kind of a sweet spot where it makes sense to change jobs after a certain period of time?
Yeah, I definitely will say there is something like a generational thing where I do feel like it is true. You said where these people used to stay enrolled, 10 plus years, or even like for really long periods of time. And I think it's also sometimes it will be based off of certain locations too. For example, when I was in the Bay Area, people would job hop. Like that was just kind of part of the culture in many ways, versus like I'm in Atlanta now. I think it's definitely like a lot more traditional like companies, and you don't see it as much. It's interesting for me because a lot of clients will ask me about like, hey, I'm concerned that I look like a job hopper. I've been moving from job to like I've gotten a new position every other year, and I'm afraid the companies are going to think I'm too jumpy. And I'll say that, yes, that is a possibility that there are some, especially I think for like maybe more traditional company, that is like a possibility, but it's not necessarily about like you making those jumps, but like how do you explain and talk about those jumps? So let's say you've been in a role and every 6 months you get fired from a position, then that's going to probably be a problem, and you're going to have to find a way to talk about that. But if you can tell a story about like, hey, I'm leaving this position because I got recruited into this role and then I stayed and then there was an opportunity to take this position. So if you can really tell, it's kind of more about how you tell the story than like what you actually did. So I think that that probably matters like more, but I do think that that's one of the most common questions that candidates like ask me, like when we do resume reviews or kind of talking through that. And it's something I think, especially now, even I've had clients that are, they've been unemployed for like maybe over a year. And they're like, I'm concerned about like, my marketability and like, what does that mean? A year, probably 2 years ago, if someone did have a gap on their resume that was 6 months, you would usually ask questions about like, I wonder why that's a little weird that they haven't been working. However, I think now, again, we're in such a different time. And there have been, unfortunately, a lot of layoffs, people that, like, even took time off during COVID or, women that have stayed home or anyone in the family have stayed home with their children or whatnot, or, people take mental health breaks. It's like people do show, I think, a lot more grace like, to people about, if you do have a gap in your resume, don't be concerned. I think that's one of the big fears that I hear from clients is like, I've been unemployed for 2 years. I'm not going to be able to get a job. And I would say, like, it goes back to how do you tell that story?
Well, and that's so true. When you said that, it's like a little light bulb went off for me too, because really that's true in anything. So if we are negative about it and thinking, our internal critic is beating ourselves up, and that's how we relay the story, right? Yeah. And so being able to, maybe it's being honest, maybe it's putting a more positive spin onto it, right? There's different ways, but how we are internally telling ourselves the story is huge. Like I change jobs every other year because I was in this period of growth and I was able to learn this, over here. And then I was able to go in on this project and try this challenge and do this other thing. And maybe that's great. And the other person was like, I loved my boss. I loved the people that I was working with. And I stayed there for 18 years, maybe could have made more money doing something else, but I got what I needed out of that. So how you are going to think about it, of course,
it's going to
it is going to impact that. So yes, our stories are so important.
And Kristen, that brings up a really good point that like maybe when you were talking, I just thought about too, of back to your initial question of do people job hop more? I think that that's a big thing now where we see people, switching jobs probably every 2 to 3 years. And a big part of that is like, they say that like if you're staying in a position, you are missing out on compensation the longer you stay at a company, unfortunately. Not all companies are like that, but for a lot of companies. And so it does make sense in some cases for people to look for jobs. I think ideally if you can find a role where you could stay at for like 5, 10 plus years, but I do think like that's kind of getting more rare, unfortunately. And I think it's comp a big thing where people unfortunately have to look for jobs sometimes because you are missing out on income if you stay in a role too long.
Right. Well, yeah. And the benefits that companies used to provide for longevity and loyalty just aren't the same.
Aren't there,
I mean, you're not going to find pensions the way that you did 30, 40, 50 years ago, or even 401k matches are, from what I hear, is much lower, almost non-existent in some industries. And so people feel like, hey, I'm not getting professional development. I'm not growing here. And there's no place for me to go. Any final thoughts as we are wrapping up this episode? Just if somebody is looking for a change, maybe something that you can add, or words of wisdom that you like to impart with clients.
Yeah, I think a big thing is like just take a step. What is something that you could do? And so if it is something where you're feeling stuck or you're wanting to like move into a different industry, just thinking through what is the littlest thing that I can do. And a lot of people want to think through everything or kind of figure out all of the what ifs. And sometimes, again, you're just never going to be ready, but just finding the smallest step you could take, whether that's looking on LinkedIn for like different jobs, if it's updating your resume, having a conversation with someone in your network, or kind of reaching out to like build your community. So just like thinking through like what are the little steps I can do to like work towards whatever your big dream would be. And also I would say that I'm a big believer of like things will always like work out in their timing. And so that is something I always like tell my clients that is like do genuinely believe that like you are going to get to where you're supposed to go at the right time. Like if it's a job search or moving into a different position, sometimes that journey might take longer than we would hope for sometimes. But if you stick with it, you can work toward whatever your dream or hope is in your career or in your life.
It's rarely on our own timeline, but we can get there. Mary, where can people find out more about the services you provide and find you online? Where do you hang out?
Yeah, so my website, thestepforwardcoach.com, and then also on Instagram thestepforwardcoach.com as well.
Okay, perfect. As always, those will be linked in the show notes. So thank you, Mary, for talking to us about how to take a next step forward in your career and offering some strategies and thoughts. Certainly have appreciated that. So all of my listeners, thank you so much, and I will catch you next week. Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.